Hello, this is part 6, and I need to go back again to in high school with that first boy that I had sexual relations with in a pickup truck in Grand Canyon. And then, if you will remember, 2 days later, he I could say he cheated on me, but I don't. I realized later that he never thought of me as a girlfriend, and I thought he did, but that wasn't what it was. Anyhow, I wanted to go back to that story because there's some more dramatic things that happened there. Is as I mentioned, I was very painful. I was suicidal for years um, over him, and I had really thought that he was the person I was supposed to stay with forever. That's what I thought, and that's what I felt, and that's what I wanted, and and I was willing to suffer for him. But anyhow, what happened is that I found out that Margot, the girl in San Diego that he had come, out running out of the house, holding hands, and staying in San Diego for a week or two just to go see her every day while coming back sometimes and just sort of beating beating me up light. It wasn't bad enough to go to a hospital, but I wasn't used to people hitting me. He wouldn't even tell me why at the time he did it. Anyhow, I found out another girl at that high school also had fallen in love with him. And she and I became good friends. And we decided that we'd be willing to share him. Crazy. I was a crazy girl. Anyway, but we both found out about Margot coming back to Denver because of Michael, because she was in love with Michael. And we didn't know any of the details except for that he had rejected her and she tried to kill herself and ended up in the hospital. And that made me and this other girl, Pam, very angry. And we decided that we needed to go teach Michael a lesson. And so we walked over to a house where he knew he was. I don't know how we knew he was there, but he was visiting a new friend of his that lived in my neighborhood, and we walked over there. And I don't remember what I said to him, but it was like, it is not okay for you to just go around breaking girls' hearts. And, we heard about how Margot tried to commit suicide, and that is not okay. I was willing to go through all this suffering just and let Margot be happy, but look what you've done to her. And then he was like, very arrogant and nonchalant, and who cares, and so what. And so Pam and I had decided that if he gave us any trouble, we were going to beat him up, which is really crazy because neither she nor I had ever been violent in our whole lives, and we didn't even like violence. We just didn't. That's how crazy, over the top we were about him. And I went and I just took one hand to go hit him, and next thing I know, I'm on my back and he's punching me, and the fight was over, and we just left. Well, after that happened, my anger brewed, as in brewing tea. It just it's steeping. It was getting stronger. It was like, what can I do? I can't beat him up. And here I was. How old was I? I was 16. I was 16. And I thought it would be doing the world a favor if I would just kill him, because he's just going to go around breaking girls' hearts and putting us all through all this hell, emotional hell, and it would be better for the world if he just died. And I was seriously considering that I wanted to murder him. And I was talking about it outside of school. We had all these grassy areas where people would go hang out and talk. And somebody was listening, and I didn't know they were listening. And I was telling one of my friends that I wanted to get a gun and kill him. And immediately after I said that, this guy who I'd never met crouched down next to me and said, "Want to buy a gun?" And later I did learn about this guy, that he could have gotten me a gun really quickly and easily. But I said, no. I mean, I hadn't thought it all through yet. And then I thought it through. And I thought about, well, if I kill him, then I'm going to have to go to jail, and then they'll put me in court. And then his mother will be there, who already hates me. And I just didn't want to deal with the ramifications. That is the only reason that I did not pursue murdering someone when I was 16. So this tells you how, as time goes on, as you're sinning, things can get bad, can get really bad. And yet, Jesus was always there. He was always there. He knew everything that was happening. I'm really convinced that the more I look back on my life. Anyhow, I guess I don't think there's anything else I need to tell you from that period. Except I wanted to mention a little bit more about the year that I had the sleep paralysis, because I kind of glossed over. I didn't explain very much of that. And that was that it wasn't always a heavy thing on my chest. Sometimes I could just sense a really dark spirit just kind of above, lingering over me. And I could feel it pulling me. It was like it was trying to pull me out of my body. And I always, I couldn't move or anything, but in my spirit, I resisted. I would just, with all my spiritual might, whatever that is, I resisted. And so he never was able to pull me out. But then there was a point where, not too long after that, it was within a year or two, and I have a lot of trouble keeping everything entirely chronological, but it was within a year or two, before or after, I was living in a very small apartment with a married couple, and it was a one-bedroom apartment, but it had a large living room, so they cordoned off with curtains a corner of the living room for me to sleep in, which was very sweet. And but this was a very strange apartment. For one thing, it was in what was called Five Points in Denver, which was, if you were white, that was the dangerous place to go. And I heard about from them that there was a poltergeist in that apartment. A poltergeist being something that moves things around in the house, even though you can't see any person doing it. And I didn't live there for all that long. It was probably less than 6 months. But during that time, several times, I'd be sitting in the living room with that married couple, and we'd just be, talking to each other or listening to music, and it'd be like, bam! But it was just like, it sounded like somebody just hit something really hard in the kitchen. And every time it would be the trash bin that we had there, which was a fairly large one. You know, it was like the 13-gallon size, and it would be knocked down to the floor, but always really dramatically. Like we'd be sitting there with, bam, what's that? And the other thing that happened to me in that apartment, a couple things. One was a weird dream where I was going down a highway and there was some guy, and he was trying to touch me, or he put his hand toward me, and all this electricity came all over me, and I always felt like something like that was connected with that apartment. And then one time I was taking a nap in that married couple's room. It was during the day. I think they were both at work, and or something. And I had a couple friends that had come. There must have been somebody home, because I had a couple friends who had come to visit, and they were sitting in the living room, and there was French doors between the living room and the married couple's bedroom. And I don't know what they were doing there. Nobody had woken me up. I don't know why. And it started. What had happened was, I thought, boy, it keeps trying to pull me out of my body when this happens. So I think maybe next time I should just let go. Maybe I shouldn't be afraid. And so this time, when the sleep paralysis came and I started feeling it pulling on me like it was going to pull me out, at first I was going to let it, and I started feeling myself getting pulled out. What felt like it was just like trying to jerk me out really fast, and that scared me, and I immediately changed my mind and resisted. And I don't know how that can happen, but somehow I ended up going really quickly right back into my body. And that was when I sort of like, opened my eyes, and I think I had, one thing I always did when I had sleep paralysis is I would try really hard to scream, because I never could, but when my voice would finally break through it all, then it would be gone. Then I would be able to move again. And so that had happened as well at the same time, and it would come out sounding like a turkey call. Even though I was trying to scream, it would come out like, ah! And my friends heard it, and they came to the door. Anyway, those were some of the weird experiences I had with sleep paralysis. And also around that same time, I was smoking marijuana a lot around friends, and it was really peer pressure. I really didn't like smoking it, and there was two reasons. One is I kept hearing people say, or I heard it maybe just a couple times, and people said, only people who have mental problems or who are a little bit crazy, they're the ones that have trouble smoking marijuana. If you're just a really sane person, it's not going to bother you at all. And I had a fear of being crazy. And I wanted to prove I was not crazy by smoking the weed, because that's just how stupid I was. And and because, everybody else was doing it, and it was to be part of the crowd. But I hated it because it always made me feel paranoid. And around that time, one day I was thinking about it, and I realized, I thought, geez, if I'm only going to do something because other people want me to, and I believe them more than I believe myself, then I really am crazy. And that was the first bit of where I started really resisting smoking marijuana for quite a while. When I say quite a while, I probably mean, not very long. But it was an extended period of some, maybe a few years. And So now, back to where we were. Um, Trying to think if there was anything else I have left out some stories. I left out the stories. I think I mentioned that I went hitchhiking all through New Mexico, Arizona, California, up to Portland, back down through Idaho, and back to Texas. And in that, there was some strange experiences, including two 18-year me and the other girl, we were always trying to figure out how to make sure to only take rides that were safe. And we had decided that people under 30 were safe. That was the time when everybody didn't trust people over 30. And so there's these two 18-year-old boys that picked us up, and that all turned out to a bad thing. And one of them tried to rape me, and I just fought back really hard and kept saying things to try to make him feel ashamed of doing that. You know, here he was, only 18 years old. And so he finally got off of me, but at the same time, during that trip, there was, at least one person, maybe more, that I did sleep with, because I was that loose, and and then one of our last rides was so scary. He turned out to be, I call him the psycho killer. And I don't like telling this story because I don't like remembering it, but I should tell it. So we were hitchhiking, and at this point, because we'd have the trouble with the 18-year-old boys, we weren't as much age conscious, but we would say, well, if it's a man, we don't want more than one man in the car, because we realized how easily we could be overwhelmed by the strength of two men as opposed to one. And I don't remember what we tried to make little rules so we could figure out who was safe and who wasn't. And obviously that did not work when I tell you about this ride. It was a little VW Bug, and there was a guy in it. He wasn't later when he stood up, he was not very tall, and he wore a cowboy hat, and he just seemed like a nice guy. And my friend that I was with, that was hitchhiking with me, Jenny, she sat in the back seat and I sat in the passenger seat. And he'd be talking about his wife. And then he would recite to us these long love poems that he had written to his wife. And remember, there was a gas station. He had to get out to go get some more gas. And while he was out of the car, she and I talked, and says, wow, he's really nice, isn't he? That's so sweet, those poems that he writes to his wife. We just thought he was definitely the safest ride we could have ever gotten. And then he came back to the car, and my hitchhiking partner had a very bad habit of always begging people to let her drive. I thought that was rude. That's why I say bad habit. I didn't think that was a good idea. And in this particular case, it was not a good idea. At least, who knows? God worked it out so we didn't die. But she begged him to let him drive. And he decided to let her drive. So she goes to get up she went and got into the driver's seat, and I was about to get into the back seat where she had been so he could sit at the passenger seat. But he tried to follow me into the back seat. And as soon as I realized that, I wouldn't do it, and I got out. It was like, no, I'll either sit in the back by myself or the front by myself. And at that point, that's when I saw his eyes changed. It was so weird. There's only 2 times in my life I've seen somebody's eyes change right in front of me. The other time it wasn't as scary, but this time it was pretty scary because his eyes just suddenly looked like a wild animal. I don't know how to explain it, but it was scary. It was scary to see how his eyes changed. And so I continued to insist, that I would sit in the front or I'd sit in the back, but I wasn't going to sit in the back with him. And so he decided to sit in the back, and I sat in the front. And my hitchhiking partner was she tended to be very unaware of what was going on at all times. So she any subtle thing happened, she never noticed it. Anyhow, uh, we were sitting there and about to drive off, and I happened to look in the rearview mirror on the side, outside the right side of the passenger seat, and I happened to look there right when